In this episode, you'll discover how inflammation shapes the course of chronic and terminal illness and why reducing inflammatory burden can change trajectories that once seemed fixed. You've been told it's incurable, but here at Renegade Remission, we believe in rewriting the story. If you're facing a terminal or chronic illness, you are not alone. I'm Eleni Welch, certified nutritionist, and each week I share healing strategies and remission stories to help you take control of your health, feel better, and rediscover hope. Welcome back to Renegade Remission. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why inflammation shows up across diseases, how inflammatory load influences progression and resilience in the body, and you'll hear a rare medically documented ALS-spectrum case where reducing inflammatory and toxic burden coincided with unexpected improvement in healing. I'll share a gentle, compassionate framework for identifying where inflammation may be showing up in your own body and help you understand how to begin reducing it without overwhelm or fear. When someone is diagnosed with a serious illness, whether it's cancer, ALS, dementia, autoimmune disease, or heart failure, they're usually given a name for what is happening in their body, a diagnosis, a label, or a prognosis. But what they're rarely given is context. We're not told what biological forces may have been building quietly beneath the surface for years. We're not told why very different diseases often behave in strikingly similar ways, and we're rarely told that many of these illnesses share the same internal stressors long before symptoms ever appear. One of the most consistent stressor is chronic inflammation. Across thousands of studies and hundreds of remission stories, researchers keep seeing the same pattern. When inflammatory burden is reduced through nutrition, metabolic support, toxic load reduction, nervous system regulation, and immune balance, the body often becomes more stable, resilient, and capable of outcomes that were not initially expected. Before we explore the science, I want to begin with a real, peer-reviewed case from the ALS literature that illustrates just how important inflammation and biological burden may be, even in diseases long considered relentlessly progressive. In 2017, a case report was published describing a 49-year-old man diagnosed with progressive muscular atrophy, a motor neuron disease that falls within the ALS spectrum and is closely related to classical ALS. At the time of diagnosis, he showed clear signs of motor neuron degeneration, progressive muscle weakness, abnormal electromyography, EMG findings, and declining physical function. Like many people facing motor neuron disease, he was told to expect continued progression. What makes his case unusual and why it was published is what happened next. Under medical supervision, his clinicians explored whether chronic inflammatory and toxic burden might be contributing to ongoing neurological stress. Testing revealed elevated heavy metal levels along with other markers suggesting oxidative and inflammatory strain. Rather than focusing on symptom suppression alone, the care plan centered on reducing biological load of toxins. This included removal of dental amalgams, medically supervised chelation therapy, antioxidant and micronutrient support such as alpha-lipoic acid and selenium, dietary changes emphasizing plant-based anti-inflammatory foods, and correction of nutritional deficiencies. Over the following months and then years, his clinical course diverged sharply from expectations. His muscle strength improved, his functional capacity stabilized rather than declining, and most notably, repeat EMG testing reportedly no longer showed the progressive, neurodegenerative patterns expected in ALS-spectrum diseases. By approximately 18 months, his clinicians documented sustained neurological improvement. Over 3 years, the stability persisted, an outcome rare enough in motor neuron disease that the authors emphasized the need for further investigation. This case offers something profoundly important, evidence that, even in severe neurodegenerative illness, reducing inflammatory and toxic burden may meaningfully alter the internal environment in which disease progresses. Importantly, this same pattern of inflammation is seen across many chronic and terminal illnesses beyond ALS. Cancer progression is associated with inflammatory signaling that promotes tumor growth and immune evasion. Autoimmune diseases reflect inflammation that has lost its regulatory balance. Neurodegenerative diseases show chronic immune activation within the brain. Heart disease, diabetes, and dementia all share inflammatory underpinnings. Inflammation is the terrain in which illness worsens, and terrain, unlike genetics, is often modifiable. One of the most important reframes in healing is this: inflammation is not a personal failure, and it is not your body attacking you. It is your body responding to cumulative load. That load can come from many sources: metabolic stress, infections, environmental exposures, nutrient deficiencies, unresolved stress, poor sleep, gut dysbiosis, or immune dysregulation. Over time, the body's ability to resolve inflammation becomes overwhelmed. What the ALS case illustrated was a principle. When enough inflammatory inputs are reduced, the nervous system can regain stability. Neurons that are under constant stress are given a less hostile environment in which to function. This doesn't guarantee recovery, but it does expand what may be possible. If you're living with a chronic or terminal illness, your diagnosis tells you where the problem is showing up, but it does not always tell you why. Inflammation is one of the most common whys across diagnoses, and reducing inflammatory load is not about doing everything perfectly. It's about identifying where your body is under the most strain and gently lightening that burden. This might look like stabilizing blood sugar, supporting gut health, reducing exposure to inflammatory foods or chemicals, improving sleep, supporting nutrient status, and calming the nervous system. On their own, each of these things is powerful, but together they can change the environment completely in which disease unfolds. You don't need to do everything at once. In fact, doing less consistently is often more effective. You might begin by asking, where is inflammation likely highest in my body right now? What feels like the gentlest place to begin reducing load, and what support would help my body feel safer rather than stressed or strained? Healing is about creating conditions where repair is more likely to happen. The ALS case you heard today rewrites something important: the assumption that nothing can change once a diagnosis is given. Inflammation reflects burden, and burden in many cases can be reduced and erased. Your body is not static. It's responsive, adaptive, and even when outcomes are uncertain, there is power in understanding the forces at play. You're not defined by your diagnosis, but you are defined by the care you bring to your body, one thoughtful step at a time. And sometimes that's where possibility for healing begins. I hope that this episode has brought you some clarity in the role inflammation may be playing in your own healing journey and given you some practical steps to begin reversing that today. Stay tuned for our next episode, and as always, go be renegades.